When you started talking about who you really are, I really have thought about that, because I thought, who am I? I don't really know who I really am. And I went back and back and back to Source before I became physical, and I realized that who I really am is not image-based. That Source is not image-based. That Source doesn't see or speak, doesn't hear my words, it doesn't see visually the images that I see here in this physical reality.
Why would you say that? Why would you say that? If Source can flow through all that you are, then doesn't Source have access to everything you are? When we really want to see something, we look through the eyes of a fly.
Yes, but when you say who you really are, it's like it's a knowing. The difference...
Well, who you really are, here's the way we mean that. Who you really are is non-resistance. Right. Who you really are is the best of all of that. Mm-hmm. In other words, it's just a matter of reaching, as you say, deeper, deeper, deeper until you find that place of resonance. But if you really want to know who the fullness of Source is, get yourself tuned in, tapped in, turned on, and feel the exhilaration of a moment in your physical life. And that's who Source is. Right. In other words, in the same way that we cannot separate you from Source and want you to not separate yourself from Source, we do not separate ourselves from you. In other words, just because you're having a moment of resistance doesn't mean that we are.
No, it feels like there's two me's. There's an image-based me that I feel that the images that I see are definitive, that I define myself by what I see, my weight, what la la la. But my Source does not do that at all. My Source knows the wholeness of me.
But here's the thing that we want to soothe just a little bit here, because it sounds like what you're saying is, and we get why you're saying it. If you think of non-physical, then you think of non-place. So you think of non-eyes, and you think of non-ears, and you think of non-fingertips and noses and taste buds and so on. So we get why that non-physical seems less specific. But it isn't that way, because it is possible to be non-physical and purely positively specific. Mm-hmm. In other words, you could walk into a fragrant garden, and the reason that you can fill your lungs with such fragrance is because you're tuned to the frequency of Source, and your ability to interpret the fragrance is so divine. Then you come across the dog poop, and Source doesn't breathe that in. Right. In other words, that's sort of the difference that we're talking about. Source has the ability to define so clearly what parts of your experience it wants to participate in or is a vibrational match to.
That's the blending of being able to hold a perspective of knowledge of all that is and still be physically walking in this.
Well, you see, we're making it a little more complicated than it needs to be, and it really is the reason that we've been talking about this vortex, because if you can think in terms of using your emotions to be aware of your proximity to your blending, mm-hmm. and you practice it on a myriad of subjects day in and day out, before you know it, you've tuned yourself to that frequency of who you really are, and now your point of attraction just mostly includes that. Mm-hmm. And it really is a process of caring so much about being in the vortex that you find a way to do it. Esther had a sort of amazing experience last week, because, and it is at the basis of what you're talking about here, is the basis of this story. So they were in Colorado, and when they go to Colorado, often they take their bus up to Estes Park, and they walk around the lakes in the national forest, and sometimes their children and grandchildren join them there, and so it's something that Esther looks forward to doing. But this year, the kids weren't coming, and they were there for a short period of time, and so they didn't take the bus up the canyon. Instead, they parked it down in the valley, close to the city where they were holding the seminar, because they were in the process of recording the new book, the new book called The Vortex, where law of attraction assembles all cooperative relationships. It's what we're talking about here with flawed premises explored and explained, and processes to bring you into this vortex. So Esther and Jerry have been enjoying this lovely book, and now they've set a time aside that they are going to record it. But it is hot in Fort Collins, and they are in the bus, and they are in a park that is not attractive. And when Esther opened the shades in the morning, she is looking at the side of a big white trailer, and the sun is shining on it so bright that she can't leave the windows open because it is blinding. So she puts the shades down, and they get themselves into alignment to begin recording the book. But because it is hot and because they are recording, they cannot leave the air conditioner on. And so they record until they can't stand it. They're so hot. And then they stop recording and cool it down. And then they record until they can't stand it. It's so hot. And then they turn the air conditioner on. And Esther said to Jerry, "This is not the picture of the perfect life that I had planned for myself. There is something really screwy with this picture. We have ourselves in this time crunch corner, and I am not having fun with this." And so after squirming in that discord, Esther said, "Let's talk to Abraham. I want to get into alignment about this before we proceed." And so we said, everything about your experience is about this balance of who you are. In other words, here you are as source energy. And just like breathing, everything must be in and out. In other words, you take your air in and you breathe it out. You bring your money in and you breathe it out. If you are letting more air go or more money go than you are breathing in, you get out of alignment. And if you ask more of yourself in a specific period of time than the period of time can accommodate, you get out of alignment. And if you try to do anything from your place of not being in your vortex, you get out of alignment. So let's work on this until you get into alignment. So Esther sat and thought about it, and she just could not find a way to get in alignment. "I don't want to do this right now. There's just about everything I can think of that I would rather do. I would rather take a river raft ride down the river again. I would rather take a walk around Estes Park Lakes again. I would rather slide down the mountain on the snowboard again. I would rather do anything than this right now," was about where it was. And so we said, well, it seems that given the latitude that you've given yourself, there's no alignment possible right now. So think about it in some other way. Step back from the details, step back from it and see if you can find another point of alignment. So Esther thought, well, we're going to have a wonderful product that will be available. And it will be in all of the bookstores. And then she thought, there is not enough money in the world that could compensate for this. There are so many things that are so much easier to do. So she could not find any alignment there. Not surprised. They have not been motivated in that way ever. And then she said, this is an opportunity for people to hear Abraham's rendition of this book exactly as they meant it to be. This is an opportunity for me to get in alignment and express on behalf of Abraham the exact enunciation, the exact emphasis, the exact presentation, exactly as they meant it when they wrote it. And then she clicked right into alignment. Now she's in alignment. She's sitting in the same place. It's still hot. The white trailer is still glaring, but she's in the vortex and she's in bliss. In other words, for the next 3 days, they read in joy because they got into the vortex and then proceeded, into the vortex and then proceeded, you see. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of people that in their rational minds would say, well, wait, shouldn't we move the conditions around? Shouldn't we move the conditions around in order to provide an experience? And there are a lot of things that they could have done differently to have made that more comfortable. And there are a lot of reasons that they chose that to be the way that it was. They wanted a consistent environment for the duration of the recording and so on. But what we're getting at here is you have the ability, once you understand that your alignment with you is the only thing that matters, and when you are in alignment with you, that wherever you stand, you will perceive it through the eyes of source and it will be pleasing to you. That's the reaching inward that you're reaching for. And it takes work, because sometimes you're just standing in a place where your normal ability to see, that's why you were talking about the physical senses. Your ability to see is very distracting sometimes from who you really are, because there's a lot of evidence that is around you, evidence from which you have made judgments which pull you out of your vortex that are all around you. But when you discover that under any and all conditions you can get into that vortex, and you take it upon yourself as your responsibility to be in the vortex, and you care about being in that vortex and in alignment with who you are first and foremost no matter what, then you get to see the world, whatever it is, through the eyes of Source. And when you are in complete alignment with that which is the beingness of Source, your world is magnificent. And of course, as you sustain that vibration more and more, then every little piece of everything that you want flows to you, you see. If Esther had come to that critical juncture prior to that, before they were up against this deadline, so to speak, and had done this vibrational work about this subject first, they could have been in the most beautiful place, under the most comfortable conditions, doing the thing that they love most. In other words, we are not for a moment trying to convince you that you should learn to tolerate being in unpleasant places and convince yourself, because you're hooked into Source, that you like it that way. We're just saying that from wherever you are, if you make peace with where that is on any subject in the world, you'll find your immediate peace right here and now. And as you find that peace, then it just gets better and better and better and better and better from that moment forward. And the next day, a cold front came in. They did not run the air conditioner for the next 2 days. In other words, they got into the vortex, and the entire universe cooperated, you see. There was just that one little rainstorm thumping on their roof that made them stop.
So it's a matter of finding that, remembering to go to the vortex and not get so distracted by what's going on.
It's so interesting. 100% of politics is outside the vortex. Almost all religion is outside the vortex. So it's all these people outside the vortex, because they're looking at that and not liking it, and looking at that and not liking it, and pushing against that and protecting against that, all sort of clamoring around in this unproductive, ineffective environment, where if you get into the vortex, now you have the cooperative universe assisting you, you see.
Now, can you give me just a really quick image of what I'm reaching for when I move, when I see something I don't like and I say I'm going to go into the vortex? I don't have an image for where I'm going.
Well, the easy way to do this is, whenever you know what you don't want, there's an equivalent what you do want. And you never are more capable of seeing what you do want than when you're looking right at what you don't want. It just helps you to do that, you see.
So you can just stay with the image, just flip it so that it's a pleasing image.
Because on the other side of everything you don't want is something that you do want. But an even more effective way of saying that, especially in the context of what we're talking about here, is when I'm having an outside the vortex moment, my inner being is having an inside the vortex moment on the same subject. And I have access to either one. It's just that I've trained myself over here with my eyes and ears and nose and so on. So effectively, that this is a bigger vibrational pattern within me than I want it to be. And it's sometimes hard to look here. You saw in the couple of incidences that we've done already today, it's sometimes hard, especially in the beginning, to pull yourself in that direction, because this is more compelling, because this is more active within you right now, this red hot minute. But you can do it. It just takes understanding what you're doing and why you're doing and how to do it. So what am I doing? I'm trying to get in the vortex. How do I go about it? By feeling my way there. Why am I doing it? Because the whole reason that I feel bad is because I'm incomplete, because I'm not in the vortex. That's the thing that we most want to convey to you. We don't want you to get into the vortex so you can get the stuff you want, although you will. We want you to get into the vortex because not being in the vortex is off for you. We don't want you to be in the vortex because that's where your wellness and money and lovers are, although that is. We want you to get into the vortex because that's where you are. And if you're not in there with who you really are, then you've got this resistance going on within you and you can't feel good. In other words, it's your separation is too strong a word, but it's your resistance to who you are that is responsible for every discordant moment, you see. You're supposed to feel good and you're supposed to be clear-minded and life is supposed to be good for you and you're supposed to be in love with life and you're supposed to be in love with this moment. You are supposed to be source energy in a physical body. You are supposed to see this moment in time through the eyes of source. And when you do, it looks very different than when you see this moment in time not through the eyes of source.